Good afternoon again. So it's time for our presentation for the day. It's my pleasure to introduce Deputy Commissioner, New York City DOT Deputy Commissioner Replogle. Michael Replogle was appointed Deputy Commissioner for Policy in June 2015. As the manager of DOT's policy team, he develops strategy and advises the Commissioner and City Hall on a broad array of transportation issues. Some of the key team initiatives that he's addressed with his team include development of an agency-wide strategic plan, Vision Zero efforts to eliminate road crash-related deaths and serious injuries, freight and parking strategies, climate change mitigation and resiliency, and shared mobility. So, without further ado, please welcome Deputy Commissioner Replogle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I have to apologize for my voice, which is not quite up to its normal snuff today. I'm on the edge of whatever's going around these days. I want to talk today about New York City, the NYCx Climate Action Challenge. Okay. Can you hear better now? Okay. I want to talk about the NYCx Climate Action Challenge and New York City's work around creating expanded opportunities for electric vehicle infrastructure and charging. The city has a strong commitment to reduce greenhouse gas goals. Climate change poses a huge challenge to our region. We have over 500 miles of coastline in New York City alone, and we saw with Superstorm Sandy the vulnerabilities that we have here as a city and as a region. So we as a city, and in fact the region and the state, all have adopted fairly ambitious targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. At the city level, we're committed to an 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions below 2005 levels by 2050, and a 40% reduction below those 2005 levels by 2030. In May of 2017, Mayor de Blasio signed Executive Order 26, which affirmed New York City's commitment to the Paris Climate Accord and to accelerated progress on our greenhouse gas reduction strategies that were articulated in the 80 by 50 action plan. And after buildings, transportation are the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions for New York City. And we can certainly do more, even though we're the most greenhouse gas efficient city in the nation in terms of transportation emissions per capita. We still have twice the emissions of cities like London and Seoul and Paris. And so there are things we can learn from those other places, and we look at our own actions and we see ways that we can bring our emissions down. Most of our emissions do come from light-duty vehicles, although goods movement is a growing share of the emission inventory. The keys to decarbonizing our transport in New York City, there's no single bullet that's a magic bullet to solve these problems, but we have about 2/3 of all trips in New York City today made by walking, cycling, and public transportation. We aspire to increase that to 4/5 of all trips by 2050, including shared mobility. We can do more to improve our network efficiency. Congestion is not good for greenhouse gas emissions, and we know we can operate networks in a smarter fashion using intelligent transportation systems to better manage traffic and bringing technology to bear so that we can better match demand and supply. Freight logistics is another area where we've got a lot of room for growth in our efficiency, shifting more to off-hour deliveries, shifting to fuller trucks through more efficient supply chain management and the like. freight consolidation, and the like. Fuel efficiency standards is something that's not under the city's control. It's generally set at the federal level through federal government action and the California emission standards, which can be set as a grandfathered standard, more stringent than the federal standard. And New York has opted in to those more stringent California standards, and they account those fuel economy standards will account for the biggest share of our greenhouse gas reduction in future years. But they alone won't get us to our goals. And so we do indeed need to also accelerate the electrification of motor vehicles in order to move towards decarbonization. It's, I think most experts agree that that is crucial to our long-term pathway to progress. So as we look to develop cities' electric vehicle charging efforts, it's important to look at where we're starting from. Electric vehicles currently constitute well less than 1% of our 2 million light-duty vehicles in New York City, accounting for about 3,000 battery electric vehicles registered today. And we can also see that the city's number of charging stations, while increasing, is still pretty small. When we look at the key barriers to adoption of electric vehicles, these have been around for some years. The costs have tended to be high, but these are coming down rapidly, with most major car makers introducing affordable electric vehicles in the next several years. The range has been another key issue, with 80 to 100 mile range typical up until recently, but now a number of affordable EVs are coming into the market with ranges of 200 to 400 miles. EV charging infrastructure access has been another key challenge, especially in New York City, where the majority of car owners park their vehicles on city streets rather than in a garage. If you look at the infrastructure that we have for electric vehicle charging, we lag that of many other American cities in terms of the electric vehicle share and the amount of charging infrastructure and supports that we have for electrification of transportation. So we know there's more that we can do, learning from other cities. The mayor recently articulated a goal that 20% of light-duty vehicle sales of motor vehicles should be electric vehicles by 2025. And in order to help support our 80 by 50 greenhouse gas plan. And so in response to this, we have set out to develop a citywide electric vehicle infrastructure roadmap this year to guide policy and investment in this area. We're working with Con Ed and other stakeholders to help develop a partnership for 100 or more on-street Type 2 chargers over the next year and a half or so, and to look at how we can site those most effectively as part of a pilot initiative. Now these are there are really three classes of electric vehicle charges that it's useful to think about. The Type 1 chargers are plugging into a 110 volt in your garage, and that takes forever to charge an electric vehicle. The Type 2 chargers are more like the kind of line that you have to support your electric dryer or washing machine or an electric stove. It's a 220 line, a little higher amperage and more kilowatt hours. And this will basically over 6 to 8 hours give you a full tank on your electric vehicle for a light-duty vehicle. But then fast charging units take much higher amperages and much higher numbers of kilowatts of power supply in order to charge the vehicle more quickly. And these fast charge units are much more expensive to provide, much harder to site, have more constraints in terms of the electric vehicle infrastructure, and because of the demand, they have higher demand charges. So the charge to the users will tend to be higher for fast charging than for slower charging. So that's just a little bit of the typology of this, but we are also working, and the mayor's made a commitment of $20 million towards developing DC fast charge hubs in the city with the goal of beginning development of 5 of these by the end of this year and initiating up to 50 by the end of 2020. We're also looking at installing some additional Type 2 chargers in our municipal vehicle garages. We may do some fast charge hubs in those as well. And currently we have about a little over a dozen, a couple dozen of these and are installing them at a slow rate, but have many more conduit-ready spaces in our garages. We are also developing other efforts. DCAS, our municipal fleet operator, has 1,000 municipal plug-in electric vehicles. We're going to double that by 2025. We're working in collaboration with MTA on an all-electric bus pilot on 2 different routes in Midtown Manhattan and Brooklyn, testing different technologies. Our DOT car share pilot program, which is rolling out this year, may offer opportunities for electric vehicle car share for some portion of that pilot. We're looking at freight strategies and exploring incentives and removing barriers for e-trucks and e-trikes. And we're looking at workplace charging strategies. And we already have requirements for conduit-ready parking spaces in many buildings and new parking garages, and incentives for investments in chargers. So the New York NYCx Climate Action Challenge is another effort that was launched just a month ago by the Chief Technology Officer of New York City in collaboration with New York City DOT, DCAS, New York City DOT, and some other agencies, and also with collaboration from the City of Paris. And we're calling on the global technology industry to develop and deliver creative solutions to scale EV charging hubs and accelerate the use of EVs citywide. This is an area that's new enough that we really need to explore various kinds of business models for scaling EV infrastructure. And there are a lot of opportunities for new and emerging technologies to help us address that problem. So there are 2 tracks to this EV challenge. The first track is to is encouraging submissions from various stakeholders in the private sector and public sector to look at how we can jumpstart new technologies as part of our EV infrastructure initiatives. This could involve concepts like self-charging streets, inductive and wireless charging, super high speed electric vehicle charging greater than 350 kilowatts, solar carports, connected vehicle solutions, vehicle-to-grid technologies, and other new charging technologies that use existing street, garage, and building infrastructure. There's a second track to this, which is about how to more rapidly commercialize and take to scale the existing technologies for EV charging in the 25 to 150 kilowatt charging range, which is the Type 2 and Type 3 chargers, and in looking at solar parking canopies, integrated EV charging strategies, and the like. So the Climate Action Challenge itself, the expression of interest close date was earlier this week. And we had over 60 organizations submitting 35 expressions of interest. And this came from multinational corporations, universities, researchers, electrical grid operators, designers, architects, and others. By mid-February is a deadline to actually submit an application. By the middle of March, we'll be announcing the finalists. And then announcing up to 4 winners by the end of April. And so those who win, up to 4 finalists, will be awarded $20,000 each to develop and present proposals to the collaborating New York City agencies, as well as in the city of Paris later in the year. And the ideas from these finalists will be considered for inclusion in the New York City electric vehicle infrastructure roadmap work that we have ongoing now and will be wrapping up by later this year. We have two separate studies going on in that EV infrastructure roadmap, one more focused on off-street and one more on the on-street side of things, and we're coordinating those two studies and expect that we'll have a lot of very interesting things to report on that in terms of siting criteria and business model development for how we can best advance electric vehicle charging infrastructure in New York to meet the goals that have been established by the mayor and the de Blasio administration. So I welcome all of you to explore with interest this initiative, and if you know of organizations that would be interested in participating, to encourage that engagement, and stay tuned for further developments as we announce the finalists and the winners of this competition. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present about this today.
Thank you.
I'd be happy, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Yeah, I have a question for you. The all-electric bus pilot program, do you know how they intend to be charging the buses?
Yes, I mean, somebody from MTA might respond better than I, but as I understand it, they're testing two different types of charging approaches. One is an inductive charger that would basically be positioned over the top of the bus at some intermediate bus stops so that it could top up the bus along the route when stopping at waypoints for schedule adherence. And the other is more designed to sort of be an out and back solution, a little heavier, more batteries on the bus. Two different manufacturers, two different technology approaches. The challenges of electrifying the bus fleet are considerable in terms of the demands on the electrical grid. I understand that if you were to electrify a full MTA bus terminal where the buses are maintained, that would draw as much power as the Empire State Building. Just to put that into perspective. So the demand charges for that are quite considerable because the power is priced based on the demand draw on the network, and it's a marginal pricing system. And right now our electric utility regulatory structure in New York State has some potential to have adjustment of those demand charges, but it's a cumbersome process to make adjustments in those marginal demand charges in a way that doesn't work against moving towards fast charging for electrical vehicles and towards very high demand terminals for charging, like a bus where you're trying to charge several hundred buses every evening. So there are a lot of issues that need to be worked out, and I think MTA is wise in taking a pilot approach to scaling this, testing on two routes, testing a couple technologies, seeing how that works. If you do look at the experience in China, Chinese cities are in fact moving rapidly towards the electrification of their transport sector, including buses, as well as light-duty vehicles. And China has committed to phase out gasoline and petroleum-fueled motor vehicles by, I believe, 2030. So ambitious targets are being set. Norway has similarly set ambitious targets for full decarbonization of their transport sector. So a lot of lessons that need to be learned from other places, but we need to start where we are and get some experience with some pilot initiatives. Yes?
One question might be, how would the electricity for all this be generated?
Well, that's a key question. I mean, I think, New York State has a mix of electricity. We get a lot from hydro, and that's very clean carbon. We get some from nuclear, which is clean but has its own issues. We still get some from coal and fossil fuels. And that certainly has a greenhouse gas impact, but I'm not an expert on it, but I know that the state is working towards reducing the carbon footprint of the electricity sector in the state and moving towards decarbonization with greater use of solar, wind, and hydro. Yes?
First of all, thank you for your presentation. It's very nice to see where the city is trying to move in the direction you've taken to remove these greenhouse gases. Will your presentation be available to the public?
Yeah, I see no reason why we couldn't make this available on the NYMTC website if that's of interest.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
You mentioned the electric trikes. What scale is that? We seem to be right on the cusp of the whole issue of the electric bicycle. Where is there any evolving thinking on this within the city?
I think it's a difficult issue politically right now, and you know, I think currently under New York State law, electric bicycles or any bicycle with a motor is not capable of being registered by the State Motor Vehicle Administration, and if it has a motor and it's not registered, then it's illegal to operate on New York streets. There's 3 bills pending in the legislature that would address this in different ways. The DOT, City DOT has been working with NYPD towards supporting a strategy that would adopt pedal assist bicycles, low speed, under 20 miles an hour, as potentially legal to operate in the state. But you know, the politics are difficult, and you know, there are a lot of people who are just opposed to electric bikes in general because of the bad behavior of some cyclists who operate them. I think there is a lot of interest from the logistics carriers, UPS, DHL, you know, FedEx, those types of groups in deploying electric assist, pedal assist bicycles or tricycles or quadricycles. One of those carriers recently remarked to me that, you know, something like 40% of the volume of packages and letters that they make deliveries on in Manhattan are letters and small packages that can fit in 1 cubic meter quadricycles or tricycles. And in other cities, they have shifted to delivering those by such pedal assist vehicles, electric vehicles, and thereby reducing the number of trucks on the city streets. So there are opportunities, I think, to explore that as we explore ways of reducing congestion in Manhattan. That might be one way to go forward, but we do have these legal and political challenges to work through. So it's too soon to say how this all works out. Yes?
Yeah, following up on the e-bikes, I understand that officially they're illegal, and yet you see tens of thousands of them on the streets of New York. Now, the mayor proposed something about making, you know, cracking down on the owners of the establishments. What's happening with that, and why are there still so many illegal vehicles in the streets of New York if they're illegal?
Well, I was at a town hall meeting with the mayor last night up on the Upper East Side, and he spoke to this issue and you know, brought forward the police commander from the local precinct who spoke about how they indeed are looking to you know, identify illegally operated electric bikes and go to the businesses that are being served by those and seeking to crack down on those. So the City Hall has said that it is taking action on this, and I know that there have been things posted in the media just in the last few weeks about increased enforcement efforts. I think this is an issue that's very complex, and you know, there's, I think, opinions run high on both sides of, you know, what's a prudent approach to working through these issues.
My only point is that if they're illegal, and everyone can see that they're illegal, and they're running on the streets, then why aren't they arrested and punished?
Well, I can't answer. It's ultimately it's a police enforcement issue. It's a police resource issue. I think I'll leave it at that. Yes.
Thank you for the presentation that you outlined what the city's efforts are directly funding the charging stations. So what are the efforts the city's making to work with private companies who are in terms of siting and infrastructure?
Well, we are looking at ways in which there's a whole effort that's been funded by the Volkswagen emissions cheating scandal that Volkswagen put several $billion into a fund and set up an organization called Electrify America, which is giving out grants to state and local governments and supporting private investment efforts to, among other things, support electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And so the city's working with Con Ed and others in the private sector to explore opportunities for collaboration on developing electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And this challenge that the Chief Technology Officer issued is one opportunity, one of the channels by which we're seeking ideas from the public, from the private sector, to enhance cooperation.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Replogle, for your presentation. We enjoyed it. We look forward to hearing about the climate action challenge, and I hope you get a lot of applications.
Great.
I look forward to seeing the pilot program.